Thank you for joining us again for Let the Bible Speak. This is the last lesson I'll have on difficult things. And today's lesson is entitled, One Church is Just as Good as Another. There are those who really believe that. And the reason why this is a difficult thing is, the Bible really doesn't teach this. And I can just sort of see how easy it is to for a person to want to believe this. You don't want to judge anybody or judge any group. And so let's just make them all right. And therefore, one is just as good as another. Well, the problem is they're not all right. Jesus says in Matthew 16, verse 18, he says to Peter, he says, I will build my church and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Jesus says he's going to build his church. And so that lets us know that the church is not under man's control. It's not under, it's not based on my whim. I just can't do what I want. And many people today are certainly just doing whatever they want. And so one can't be just as good as the other. You add to it what is recorded in 2 John chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. This is recorded by John. John says, whoever transgress and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ have both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching or this doctrine, do not receive him into your house, nor greet him. For he who greets him share in his evil deeds. He talks about someone teaching a different doctrine that doesn't bring the doctrine or abide in the doctrine of Christ. How can a church be just as good as the next church if church A does not abide in the doctrine of Christ? One can't just be just as good as another. But you add to that sort of teaching, you think about sort of this principle, try to apply that to everything else. Is one teacher just as good as another? When the Bible speaks of false teachers in 2 Timothy 2 and verse 1. Is one prophet just as good as another? When the Bible speaks of false prophets in 2 Timothy 2 and verse 1 also. Was one apostle just as good as the next? When the Bible speaks about false apostles in 2 Corinthians 11 verse 13. And what about one Christ? Is that just as good as the next Christ? And that sounds crazy, but the Bible speaks of those who would in fact be false Christs. In Matthew 24th chapter in verse 5. Matthew 24, verse 5. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ. Well, one is just as good as another. That sounds like blasphemy, doesn't it? Why does it sound like blasphemy when someone takes a stand of position concerning the church that he died for, concerning his body, that one is just as good as another? One is not just as good as another, in the same way as one Christ is not as good as another. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. One is not as good as the other. And there are churches out there teaching doctrines that's not of Christ, and they will deceive and have deceived many. One is not as good as the other. I call your attention to Revelation 3 and verse 1, the last passage. Revelation 3 and verse 1. It says, these things says he who has the seven spirits of God and the seven stars. He writes to the church at Sardis and he says, I know your works, that you have a name, that you are alive, but you are dead. One is just not as good as the other. And the other is simply the one that Jesus Christ built. That's the church you want to be a part of. That's the one you want to go find and compare to the teachings of the scriptures. And then you want to follow the same thing. You don't want to be a part of something false. You want to be a part of something real. Difficult things. There are many who are part of something false, all on the basis of one is as good as the other. That's our time. If you'd like to study these things deeply, look at the characteristics of the church that we can read in the scriptures and see the one that Jesus Christ has established and what that looks like so that you can go find a church practicing in the way that you can see it in the scriptures. We'd be more than happy to help you. Give us a call, 843-553-5157. We'll see you next time.